This is Human-Environment Relationships with information gathered from Chapter 5, Piney Woods People, and Chapter 9, Assault on the Southern Pines. Chapter 5 mainly deals with the influence mankind has had with the control of the population of the Piney Woods trees. The general consensus is that wherever humans were, they had an influence over the species that cohabitate with them. The Native Americans are said to have controlled burns in the forest in order to facilitate hunting and the like. The longleaf pine forests were said to be amazingly open, a stark contrast to the gloominess of the hardwood forest. The longleaf pine forests were so open that it facilitated cattle farming. This, combined with low maintenance the cattle required, caused the cattle farming business to boom. It is nothing uncommon for one man to own 100 or more heads of horned cattle. And thanks to DeSoto, the hog was also introduced into the area and was farmed in the Piney Woods. Here we can see the correlation between the location of the longleaf pine forests and cattle farming. This really comments as to just how big the industry was at the time. The top portion shaded area is where the amount of cattle present in the area were at least 3 times more numerous than people. Chapter 9 speaks about how the longleaf pine was so horribly managed that it was practically wiped out. It speaks of how the lumber industry boomed as the population grew, and once the hardwoods from the north were depleted, they focused on the longleaf pine. The longleaf pine forests were thought to be an inexhaustible resource, and the lumber industry treated it as such. Up until the Civil War, cutting timber and getting it to market was a slow and difficult process. Timber cutters worked mostly along rivers and streams, sometimes using oxen to transport the logs to the stream, and then floating the logs. Once the timber was exhausted in the area, they moved upstream. Mills were placed near the river or the stream. It was when the northern white pine was nearly depleted that the eyes of the timber industry turned to the longleaf pine. Trainloads of lumbermen arrived to profit off the longleaf. Whole towns were built around the sawmills. The railroads played a huge role in the decimation of longleaf pine. As the northern timber companies bought colossal amounts of acres of longleaf pine forests, a spider's webs of tracks swiftly crisscrossed the region. Sawmills were situated every few miles along the tracks. Some of these mills were gone in a decade or two, abandoned or moved. So much timber was wasted. If it so much had a knot in it, they couldn't give it away, and yet they still cut. It was even commented on that they should save their timber and wait until the demand rises, but they paid no heed. The cut-and-run method is one of America's most shameful chapters. The lumbermen would cut everything in their path to get to what they wanted. They would find maybe a single living pine, 4 inches in diameter, with a single 5-acre block. Not only did the forests have to contend with that, but with the way the taxes were at the time, it was cheaper to have land with absolutely no trees on it than to have land that had some trees that weren't cut on it. All of this truly decimated the virgin forest that America possessed.